Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I am O'Brien McMahon, and this is People Business. In this episode, I am joined by Brent Kedzierski. Brent is an award-winning thought leader and innovator in the field of human performance, human-centered connected worker ecosystems, and the future of industry. Throughout his career, he has consistently delivered groundbreaking insights and transformative contributions. Brent's expertise has earned recognition from respected publications like Harvard Business Press, Chief Learning Officer Magazine, Workforce.com, BBC News, and many more. His webinars have been featured as Editor's Pick of the Year, and his podcast appearances consistently rank as top listens across the industry. Prior to founding HumanWorks, Brent spent nearly 25 years as Shell's veteran global HR transformation strategist, and he is a passionate advocate for creating a more human-centered approach to work. We talk a lot in this about both the history of work and the future of work and how work has evolved and where we're going. It was a really interesting conversation, and there's a lot in here around the way leaders can and arguably should be thinking about the future of their people and the future of the way that work gets done and how to integrate technologies, not necessarily do this or do that, but frameworks to think about integrating technologies with people, what has always happened as new technologies have come in, and what that means for what the workforce might be like in the future. I hope you enjoy it. I certainly did. Here is Brent Kedzierski. Brent, welcome to the show. Very excited to have you on and talk about all things HR and organizational transformation today. So welcome to the show.
Thank you, O'Brien. I'm glad to be here, and thanks for having me on the show.
Thought an interesting place to start might be just your take on the state of employment right now. I think there's a lot of conversations happening when it comes to the workplace. Organizations are still rethinking their return to office strategies. There's more and more conversations going on around human-centered design in the workplace. There's always the tension between, are we in an employer market or an employee market? What's the general state of the world, like the season that we're in from an employment standpoint, and how organizations are thinking about their human capital?
So if you look back at history from the last 100 years and you say, let's start at 1920. And in the 1920s, you really had people being treated by companies as basically tools. People were tools. They were just like the shovel, the hammer, whatever it was. You had people like Frederick Taylor with scientific management. How could he reshape a shovel so a person used the right formed shovel for the right type of shoveling? And you really didn't have any issues with people safety. There were no standards on having fire escapes. Or I remember the Triangle Fire that happened in 1911, where it was the garment district in New York City. And up on, I think, the 10th floor of this building, it caught fire because they had all these women crammed in on the sewing machines. And what did they have? They had all this material next to all this oil for oiling machines and everything. And they didn't want the ladies to go out taking smoke breaks, so they locked all the exit doors. So once you were in the floor, you couldn't get out, and they didn't really have workable fire escapes. And so when that building went on fire, nobody could get out, and they were like falling down the elevators and all kind of crazy stuff. At that point in time, human beings, there was no thought to consideration of their well-being.
Yeah.
Then what happened is you had the Depression, which in the 1930s, that even made it worse because you had 10 people working, trying to get one job. And so they could really just pick and choose.
Yeah.
But then what you had is, so you had the utility era. They were just tools. Then you had after the Great Depression, we got into World War II, and it was all about productivity. You had the Rosie the Riveter, and they really created a spirit of hard work and productivity for the war effort because we were producing thousands of planes and tanks and jeeps and all this kind of stuff. So it was all about productivity. That's when they started to come out after the war with the economic models about GDP, right? Gross domestic product. And it was really about how much did people buy and how much was made and consumed. So that was this World War II heavy duty production. And because of that, we got into this area of all of the management. You had the researchers that were saying, how do we make things more conducive to producing mass production and scalability? And it went from like the old time-bound exercises, the time studies of the 1920s. It's just, how could you make people produce the most, the fastest? And so anyway, but then we got out of that era and then we hit in the 1990s, because the productivity era, if you think about it, that's the one that lasted long, because remember, we had quality circles and participative management, and TQM, and all these things that were fads over this time. And they were all basically trying to engage workers a little bit more.
Yeah.
And that led to this engagement era where, in, I think it was 1993 when McKinsey wrote the article, The War for Talent. And it was all about getting people in the front door. And it was all about just getting them in. We want the best people. We want the cream to rise to the top, and we want to get those people in. And that was the competition. It was just recruitment. But then we learned after 20 some years, it's not about just engaging them to get them to work more. It's about their experience. So we were hiring all these great people, but the great people don't stay if they're not treated well or it's not a great work environment. So then they started to leave. And so now we're in this age of the experience. And this is where the problem is. And this is really to the point of your question. In the workforce today, we are really at a crossroads. And if we don't get a handle on it, it's going to go belly up. I really believe this, because all of our economic models around labor and low-cost labor or high-cost labor and where things are produced and the kind of the various economies, whether it be China, they support getting low-priced products into the U.S. And then you have service sectors. We're a bit of a mess from an economic model. And we've got to go to this period of improving the worker satisfaction with their job, making jobs more that they're higher level careers, more collaborative, more creative, more cooperative in terms of how they work with people and how they work with machines, to be more cognitive. And then what we did is we used automation to take away low cost, low wage jobs, right? Anything repetitive or dangerous and all those kind of things, we were taking those away. We were displacing workers, but we weren't reinstating better work. We were reinstating still work that was slightly better, but it wasn't involving the human being.
Yeah.
And this is what's happened. I talk a lot about my son, because he just graduated Georgia Tech. He's a chemical engineer, and he's working for Eli Lilly. And when I talk to him about what he wants, purposeful, meaningful work that helps society and the environment, and it does good. He wants his life and his effort to be meaningful to something. But he also wants a livable wage. Now, this is the whole thing, that my wage proportion, inflation, everything, was much higher than his is today. My purchasing power when I was his age was much bigger than his is today. We've got this big mess today when you're talking about our school systems, whether it's secondary school or academic and university. They're not preparing people for the types of work, whether that be lower skilled service work, which is going to be a big thing now, semi-skilled work like the trades, right? And then the highly skilled work. All these percentages of this work is going to shift by 2160. That's the when the futurists think out to, about 2160. And you got to look at what GDP do we need to support the people as they grow, because you think about there's 311 million people in the United States now. I think by 2060, it's going to be closer to 400 million. Do you have enough jobs? Do you have enough good jobs? Have we moved the dot in advancing people's cognitive abilities, their creative abilities, and their collaborative ability? Because the worker of tomorrow is going to be someone much more like my son in terms of his skills and behaviors than I was.
Yeah.
And I say this a lot. I was the guy in my day. I worked and grew up in steel mills and different kinds of mills, and it was always blue collar work. And it was all about how much could you shovel? You were shoveling asphalt, whatever you were doing. I worked in like stock rooms where it was about how much did you move and ramp and do all this stuff, or the assembly line. And I was always growing up with the ethically follow, get out of the way. You do the work. The person that's the best worker is the most productive, like the Pekka, the John Henry. That was my idol, right? And when I started and did a lot of work later on in profession, I would get really upset with people that I thought were not trying their best. They weren't, working the hardest that they could.
Mm-hmm.
And that really upset me. So I would distance myself from them because I didn't value them. My son's totally different. He'll help them. He'll step in. If he sees somebody that's not doing well, instead of my thing of looking at them, as less, he looks at them, how can they be more? I'll give you a thing. When he did his orientation at Lilly, he knew he was one of the first grads landing. He knew there were going to be a new wave after. Instead of just reading his onboarding material, he basically took notes and made little tutorials. He became a service to people that he didn't yet know, but he would get to know.
That's great.
If this is the kind of worker we're going to have, is because the skill tomorrow, we're not going to have people doing so much demanding work or dirty work or going to be in crawl spaces or hazardous heights. And they're going to be the ones that can get along with people. And I'm big into this experience, the relationship that you and I have will form. It's about how I make you feel about yourself. It's how do you feel I give you skills and knowledge? Do I motivate you? Do I make you feel, put more of a smile on your face? And that's what's called this whole person competence development. Like companies in the good old days of utility era and even today, they just care about people's skills and knowledge. They say the company needs you to have these skills and this knowledge, got job descriptions to tell you what you need to do, and that's it. That doesn't cut it anymore because the 80% of what people really are in their value isn't their skill and knowledge. It's their motives. It's their traits. It's the social role they play on the job and within the team. And it's their self-image. And workers want companies to develop those areas because they're more transferable. They're applicable to everything. And they can go to any company with those. And that builds their employability.
So let me jump in on that. What is the case for employers investing in these types of skills? Why would they say, look, I need you to do X to do the job. I need you to know these kind of soft human skills because you got to lead some other people to do this. But why would I help you develop yourself as a full person or these more transferable skills so that you can go somewhere else and get a job? There's the old meme of what happens if we train them and they leave and what happens if we don't and they stay. What's the case for why organizations need to adapt to these skills or adapt to this new way of thinking that's going to actually make them better because of it?
It's been clear to me for decades, and I don't understand why companies don't get it or people don't write more about it. Skills and knowledge applied to work, which is the procedural work, job task execution, are linear. Okay. The traits, the self-image, the motives, those are exponential and those are force multipliers. So we talk about this thing called distinctive competence, right? If you think about work, if all work was linear, meaning a light flashes, that's your cue to start. You start to do whatever. Nothing goes wrong. You don't have anything to observe, no data to analyze, nobody to seek out or coordinate, no troubleshooting to do, no problem solving to do, no decision making to do, no escalation to do or not do, no documentation or reflection on the task afterward to share, to communicate. All those things I just told you were human-centric skills that I will tell you are discretionary. Some person can see a problem. I don't care. I'm going to let that leaky valve go. Let the next guy or gal take care of it. All the good things in work are the human things, the caring things, the conscientious things, the things that have traits and motives behind them and behaviors and a social role and a self-image and a brand. That's why companies should be investing in these things. And I always use this one story. I had two well engineers at Shell. And at Shell, a lot of people had the same exact kind of background with the Cambridge or Oxford, or they went to this technical school or that. And they were about the same age because Shell would hire cycles of a boom and a bust and things. And I had two well engineers. And I had to work with them because I was trying to get production and training and learning. One, I would see him coming and I would run as fast as I could. I didn't want him to be involved in anything I was doing. But again, same age, same background, same schooling, everything between these two characters was exactly the same on their resume. One I loved. I wanted him to be my mentor. He was so positive. He made me feel good. And I ran to it. I always call this the knock ratio. You always want more people knocking on your door than you knock on their door.
I like that.
And the other guy, again, couldn't stand to be around him. Somebody mentioned his name and I'd cringe. That's the difference.
Yeah.
How much more value do you think Shell got out of the guy that everybody went to versus the guy that everybody ran away from?
Yeah.
That's the answer to this. A values company is around the more intangible things like their decision-making power, their collaborative power, their persuasive power, their innovation power, the psychological safety people feel, the culture, not around the 7 steps in a procedure always.
So if I could just sum all that up into one sentence that popped in my head, and when you were talking, like this sentence just popped into my head, which is the better humans interact, the better the business does.
That's right. That's right. Because this is what's even more important. As automation continues to grow, we definitely will get rid of low-skilled jobs. That is going to happen. And remember, we are in the conceptual age. It's an age of personalization. It's a high concept, high touch. This is what we're getting to. And so what we'll call the lowest skilled jobs in the future are going to be more of the service industries. What's going to happen? Look at GDP and the money and the wealth distribution and everything. There's going to be a lot of people that want to pay for experience. Those experiences are going to be best supported by warm, caring, interesting, personable human beings. That is going to be a big sector. And like leadership, I could never stand that Shell's strategy in leadership was to take the best technical person and promote them to be the leader. Technical people notoriously aren't great, compassionate.
They and everybody else who does that.
Yeah. I believe there should be college degrees on leadership. I don't do anything, but I go to college to learn how to be an effective leader. And there should be a whole profession of Shell has a skill pool just called leadership. You don't have to be technical because a company like Shell get hung up on that. Oh, he's got to be a well engineer. No, got to be a good leader. And culture will shift to that.
Yeah.
It's just like in Shell, I wanted to outsource all coaching and development as far as personal life. There's external coaching and development services where they have trained and certified coaches. That's the company of tomorrow. And again, I go to this big thing about psychological safety because I think companies talk about it and they've talked about it for years, but as society, it's terrible on psychological safety. I have a habit I love to go into stores, companies, whatever, mom and pop shop or whatever it might be, and ask the workers about their job and what do they think. And I like to just keep that finger on the pulse. It's not good out there. And that's a real shame considering, we got 100,000 hours that I think we spend at work in our lifetime, 1,000 hours. If those hours are what I call shitty hours, and you think about it, only about 4 hours of a day is productive. Less than that even for some cases. This Asena, ASENA, they do an anatomy of work survey every year. What they find is like 60% of your time spent is about work. Not doing the work, having a meeting about doing the work, trying to find some information so you can do the work. It's all the frustration factor. And if you think about it, people are spending 60% of their work life frustrated. They're waiting on somebody else to do something. They can't get the information they need. They're waiting for a printer to start back up or a network to start back up. All these things. And I don't think companies realize what that does to employees. Because after something doesn't work, then the employee spends about 20% of that time whining about it, whinging about it, which they can.
Yeah. Let me back us up for a little bit because I think this is all interesting and it's all relevant, but I want to go back to this kind of future that we're headed into. And you had talked about how some of the repetitive, lower skilled jobs, those are the ones that have always gone away. They're going to continue to go away as we're moving up this chain in cognitive work that's being done. And at the very beginning of this, you threw out the phrase cobotting. And I wanted to just pick on that for a second. What is that? Let's just start with that. What is that?
Okay. So if you look at automation, there's levels of automation. I think there's like 7 levels of automation. Probably there's another model which had 6 or something, but it goes anywhere from like fully automated to augmented with automation or something like that. And if you think about how you can improve the capacity of a human, right? So one of the things is you can improve their visual capacity, right? So you might be able to give sensors or augmented reality. You're helping their vision, their ability to perceive and sense make. You might give auditory enhancement to enhance or increase a human's capability. I was at a conference the other day. They even have this backpack. It makes you a robot for people that have to lift heavy things because it almost feels like not valves, but it's for pressure and lifting up things. So it was like a jacket that somebody would wear.
Oh, interesting.
You have the biometrics that wear and say, I've got, Brent, you better calm down. Your heart rate's too high. Your blood pressure's getting high. But okay, so that's things that we can do to enhance humans' capability. But the cobotting is, let's just say, I'm like with this generative AI. I use it every day today because I know how to ask questions and it gives me curated data like that. And it helps me out do a lot of my research because I'll say, find me a study that talked about this in the 1980s. Do this. And it does that. I could have cut my team by 80%. It's because it just curates so much data so fast. Now we're moving in the HR space of having predictive analytics. So now all this data, because you have reams and reams of digital data, you can start to predict things based on enormous amounts of trend data, right?
Yeah.
Now we're going to move into the next one with automation, advanced automation, where prescriptive. It's going to tell me what to do. And this is how the humans are going to work in the future because I'm going to be asking questions. And right now we actually do have 2 factories in the world that are lights out. Peopleless factory. And one's Chinese and the factory actually has no windows. They don't want anybody seeing in because it's so heavily automated. And they actually build them in a forest so people can't helicopters or do any of that stuff.
Weird.
And the other ones are all fully robotics. Philips in the Netherlands where I believe they produce light bulbs. But there's only 2. There's a lot to this. We're still exiting the age where companies didn't know what to automate and what I call humanate.
Yeah.
Okay. Because they were always very simple. If it's dull, dirty, dangerous, and I can make it more productive out of that productivity model from the 1940s, then I want to do it. And they would not look at, wait a minute, you're disenfranchising the worker because those are actually tasks they like to do and builds them and gives them better information and insight for something else down the road. So companies still don't know how do you humanate something or automate it or mix it. And this is the thing you're going to have. You're going to have kids, and there are already kids doing CAD design. Think about that, right? They're using computer-aided design. Now you're going to have these people that are great on leveraging generative AI. And then you're going to have people that are great with working with AI-based analytics and AI-based this or AI-based that. People that can learn how to do that. It's just not going to be intuitive for people. You go to school to learn how to be a biomechanical worker.
Yeah. So, Brent, I saw something the other day about, I think it was Chief Technology Officer from Accenture, and he was quoted as saying that there is no AI native workforce right now. Like, this is emerging. And so if companies want to adjust to this, they're going to have to do it on their own. They're going to have to do it on the fly and build these skill sets internally and figure out for themselves what this integration of humans and technology looks like. There is no workforce out there with this skill set to hire. What recommendations do you have to business leaders today as far as what this transformation could and should look like?
I think history is it's the best teacher. Remember in Shell when digital came around in like 2011. And the big thing was, oh my goodness, how are we going to get all these people to embrace digital and understand digital. And then you had this thing called digital readiness, digital fluency, all these initiatives where the companies are scrabbling around trying to build some kind of learning center to promote people's skills in digital. And then several years after that, you had the big movement to say, oh my goodness, we need upskilling and reskilling. And how do we do that? And what's that look like? And what does it mean? And again, we fail on these things. I predict the same thing with this AI because companies don't have the incentives to look around corners for tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
And this is the thing that I always worry about is that humans are inclined to trade the hard choice or action of tomorrow with the easier solution today.
Amen.
So most companies are fine with status quo to say, oh, it'll take care of itself. They're not preemptive, proactive. And so this is really no, I'm serious. I get really negative on companies today because I know my job in Shell. My job in Shell was really hard for 25 years. I was the transformation guy. Brent was mean and I was always chugging up the hill and fighting the good fight like Don Quixote and everything. People don't like that because oftentimes if it's not their idea, they don't want anything to do with it or to change an idea. They had some fingers in the past. They don't want you messing with it. I consult with companies today. So many of them know they've got a problem, know what they should be doing, but don't do it. I'll give you a perfect example to summarize all this. In the 90s, I did a lot of business process reengineering. What would typically happen, you'd have a VP of business process engineering like myself, and I'd go structure the teams and get things together. And you pick this SME and that SME, and you'd say, okay, once a week, we're going to meet for 3 hours and a pizza, and we're going to redesign processes. And they could absorb that in their day job. They could say, okay, I'll take 3 hours out once a week or every other week. With Industry 4, it's much more complicated and labor and time intensive where you can't get your SMEs borrowed from the operator shift, and you can't do that anymore. People can't absorb that. It takes a much more focused and committed effort to really do this stuff well. That's why 75, 85% of all digital transformations fail. They deliver diluted value or they deliver the value that wasn't expected, fortunately.
Yeah.
It's because companies the world has changed. You can't integrate these enterprise-wide solutions that take a lot of thought and effort and just have it done with some bit of, discretionary effort by a few participants or best intended efforts.
What are the similarities that you see, or what are the key traits that you see from groups who have done it well?
If you look at the groups that have done it well, oftentimes I look at high risk industries like the military. They do training very well. They do it the way you're supposed to do it.
Yeah.
And train like you fight and fight like you train is their motto. And when they do training, it's A to Z, and they do all the requisite elements of training. Then you've got nuclear. They're very disciplined about their training, and they have guidelines and things like that. Then you look at aviation. The FAA dictates a lot of mandatory things, refresher training and all this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But then you get the oil and gas, and they don't have people in those heights shooting at them or possibly falling out of the sky.
Yeah. But
they've got dangerous assets and things, and they're very risk adverse from a process perspective. That's a work process perspective. Don't do it from a preparation. You think about behavioral safety in oil and gas. Not enough emphasis on that in oil and gas companies. Psychological safety. Not enough emphasis on that. You look at other enabling factors to good performance, the human performance environment. It's about, do I know what I'm supposed to do, and do I get feedback on it? Not rocket science. Do I have the right tools, information, and resources to do my job? Not rocket science. Is performing that work personally incentivizing to me, not punishing. A lot of times the best person gets shoved all the work because 5 other people don't do it. And that's not rewarding. Then you've got the individual factors, which are the skills, the knowledge, the behaviors, that whole person kind of stuff. We don't deal with the whole person. We just deal with, here's your skills you need to know and what you need to know and all that. And then you have this thing called capacity. Help somebody's capacity grow and expand and augment. Last thing is, are they motivated? That's all it is. Human performance for nearly 100 years, probably since the 40s. That's what has been proven time and time again. It's those 6 things. Now, obviously, there's people can say there's ancillary things, culture and blah, blah, blah. But to do the work, the things you need, companies aren't doing it. If I did a vulnerability assessment in most companies, the expectations kind of reality gap between workers and management or leader. Managers think they give great feedback. Workers think they get lousy feedback. Managers think they give the workers the best tools, information, and resources. Workers think that it's hard to find, it's inaccurate, I got to double check it, it's slow to come in. Companies think they incentivize workers to do good work. They don't. It's faulty decision-making by leaders. It's delayed decision-making. I'm waiting on this. It's bureaucratic decision-making.
All the negativity that bureaucracy instills in work, they don't agree with.
And like skills and knowledge, I don't get the right skills I need. I don't get the right knowledge. Nobody improves my capacity to perform, and nobody certainly provides me meaningful, purposeful work. One of the things with motives is, do you have purposeful, meaningful work? Oh, I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing. And the leaders all said, they've got great purpose. It's very clear.
Yeah.
This is why America, at least in my closer view, I've worked in multinational, but we fool ourselves into thinking we're better than we are, or we try harder than we do. I mean, I always have a problem with that, to say, I wish every worker had an app on their phone. I hate the idea of like annual employment engagement surveys. I think that's a ridiculous, invalid way to get feedback, especially in today's digital age. I could have an app that asks my worker, maybe they get $1 every day they do, ask 5 questions. Did you get all the collaboration today you needed? Were you at all innovative today? Did you have any psychological fear for your safety issues? Were all the decisions made timely and good quality? Did you get distracted by any bureaucracy, or how were you at least able to get into the flow of work for at least 1 contiguous hour? The research says every worker is interrupted every 7 minutes. And we try to get these jobs flowing now. And we wonder why people are only productive 2, 3, 4 hours a day. Is that worth somebody spending a 12-hour of their day at work? Drive to work for an hour, be at work for 9 hours, drive back home for an hour, get ready for work for an hour. I mean, you're talking 12 hours. And then the company's only getting 3 or 4 hours of productivity, and it's their fault, not the worker's fault. Traditionally, work is inflamed with poor design.
Yeah.
And that's the other thing that drives me crazy is we should design jobs today. People write job descriptions. I think that whole process they should be writing experience descriptions.
Yeah, I love that.
You're going to come work for this company, and this is the experience you should have. This is how you should be working and collaborating with your colleagues. This is how you should be learning and helping us make good decisions and all this kind of stuff. We're not doing it like that. We have a human experience cycle. It can be applied to anything, but I apply it to work. It starts with someone has expectations, and then you go to perform your job task. I'm going to be a fireman. I'm going to put on my boots. I'm going to go into the fire station, and I think this is what my day should look like. Unfortunately, it doesn't. They've got me scrubbing the underbelly of a fire truck or something. I do the work, and in that doing of the work, I'm having an experience. I'm processing the work. I'm making decisions. I'm sensing. I'm getting cues and data and all this kind of stuff. What was that experience like? Because that experience forms your perceptions, your beliefs, your attitudes, and your memory. And then you finish the work and you think about it. I don't know, that was lousy. Or you go to the water cooler. But what we're not doing today is we're not making people do it in a positive way. They should be like going into a digital system and documenting. And then what happens is it all starts again because they've got to have anticipation to do it again, either a new task or the same task. And in this experience cycle, companies don't design work for that cycle. When I design work or I look at even diagnosing work, I say the cycle is an initiation queue and a completion queue for work. In between that, you get sense making, data, cues, whatever. You get insights, AI, data-driven, curated insight. You have problems. You have to troubleshoot. You might have to problem solve. You might have to make decisions. You might have to escalate or not escalate. This anatomy of work, companies don't invest enough thought or time or management. They should have presidents, VPs of anatomy of work.
Just like I think manufacturing plants should have chief of connectivity or connected worker. I know they have chief digital officer, but that's pretty damn broad. Digital officer trying to be all things to all people. I need a VP or whatever, human connectivity at work. It'll come, but unfortunately, like most things in work in our lives, come too late.
Come slowly.
And that's my big fear when we started it. How do you get in front of it?
Yeah. So I know we're getting to the end of time here. And one question that I like to ask, which I think is relevant here, is what in your mind is the purpose of business?
Work has always been to support a civilization, right? From Egypt to whenever you want to talk about. People need to make an earning so they have consumption capacity, and that consumption capacity has to be supported by production capacity. Now, how we do that needs to change. It's worked fine somewhat up until now. It started to really diminish about 10, 15 years ago when we really started to get this sideways effort around, I'm having a better life living than my son will have. Something's gone wrong there. That wasn't the dream is for my son to be better than I am, to be better off than I am. So we've got to fix that. And I do think future of work is about designing. And this is the other thing. If you don't get what you want, you probably haven't designed in what you want. Or if you're not getting what you wanted, probably haven't designed it wrong.
Yeah.
And I look at this whole thing about GDP where we're measuring societal growth on how much we produce and consume. Is that the right metric for improving a work and society that we want people to build themselves intellectually, morally as a society? And it goes back to this. I always tell everybody that my purpose in what I do in my job is I believe that content developed, adjusted work, and a company has a purpose to do that. Remember, 50% of all primary care physician doctor visits are for work-related stress issues. Okay. We've got tremendous mental health and health issues produced by work. And these companies are producing a lot of our healthcare issues in obesity, alcoholism, drug abuse, marital conflict. If they're produced by a company that gives a worker a bad experience, and that's not what we need.
Brent, I really appreciate your perspective and just the history, one, just your own history that you bring into this, and then two, the research that you have done to have perspective on these issues. So thank you for being a guest on the show today and sharing your wisdom here.
Thanks, Brian. Always happy to kick it around.
Hey folks, one last thing before you go. If you enjoyed the episode, make sure to hit subscribe so you can stay up to date with future guests. That's it. Thanks for coming. Go make the most of your business and the people in it.